Hey, I'm Ben, and I'm the creator of Satxuma, an EMR for rehab therapists working in skilled nursing and long-term care facilities. So Satsuma is meant to be a competitor to Net Health's Optima, formerly Rehab Optima. And I'm making this video, one, to introduce Satsuma to people, and two, really to put it out there and get feedback and input from therapists and rehab directors. So Satsuma is a work in progress. I've been building it for about 8 months now. I'm a software developer. I'm not a therapist. I don't come from healthcare. And so I think it's really important for me to get feedback as early and as often as possible. So if you're a therapist or rehab director, let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see built into Satsuma. Um, Let me know if you think there's something that it doesn't need that it has. Just, I'm looking to network, I'm looking to get feedback, and I need to find customers. So any sort of collaboration or input I can get, um, the better. So anyways, let's take a look at Satsuma. Now, Satsuma is a web-based platform. That means it's basically a website. You would access it from a browser like Chrome or Firefox or Safari. And all you would do is go to satsuma.com. That's SATXUMA.com and sign up. And you can do that today for free. Just bear in mind that, if you play with the platform, well, for one, there's no payment processing system yet, and it's not completely HIPAA compliant yet, and it's not finished. So you may hit a bug or two, but you should be able to play with it and get a sense of what it does and how it works. So anyways, I have a version running locally on my laptop with some dummy data. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. All right. And this takes me to my dashboard. So I'm signed in as Rick Astley, who is the owner of ABC Therapy Company that I've set up. And this is my dashboard. So every user who signs in will see a dashboard, and it'll look sort of same layout, different data. This is one of the flagship features of Satsuma, and so I'm going to talk about this more in a minute. But to get started, let's go ahead and head over to the facilities page, and I just want to show you what it looks like to add a facility. So here I've got a table of my facilities. I'm going to click New Facility, and let's call this Pine Hill Manor. We're going to say that it is a skilled nursing facility, and just like that, I can go ahead and add the facility. So you'll notice the facility name is a required field, the facility type is a required field, and that's it. And I think when people build a platform like this, their compulsion is to make a lot of things required fields. So they'll say like, oh, it's very important to know what state a facility is in because that drives other things. And so I need to know the state, I need to know the state subcode, I need to know the address. And so they'll just start making all these fields required. And that makes sense. But in practice, it ends up being a headache. It causes friction for the end user. There are scenarios where you're adding a facility and you get called to dinner and you just want to be able to save the form and come back to it and edit it later. Or maybe you don't know the address of the facility, and so you need to do a little bit more research. Or maybe you're just adding the facility because it's legacy data, and for whatever reason, you want it to exist in your database, but you don't need to know the state or the subcode or whatever other fields. So there are all these scenarios where um, it makes sense to add a facility with a very, very minimal set of data. And if you start requiring certain fields to be to have a value, it creates this headache for the end user in numerous scenarios. And so one of the themes you'll see throughout Satsuma is that there's a very, very minimal set of required fields to get past the screen. Secondly, notice how simple this form is. At one point, someone asked me to add region because they like to classify facilities by region like New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Northwest or Southeast. And I thought about it, but you see this field called tags? Tags allow for a generic set of descriptors that you can add to a facility. So if we wanted to classify this facility as like the Northeast region, I could just type in Northeast as a tag. And if I wanted to classify it as a nonprofit, I could just type in nonprofit. So I can create any descriptors that I want as a tag. And not only is that very versatile, but it prevents me from having this very bloated form with a bunch of fields that maybe only a few companies use. And so um, The second and probably the most important theme throughout Satsuma is this strive for simplicity. Simplicity, I say it's my North Star. So um, whenever I add a new field, there has to be a really, really strong reason for me to add that field. I really challenge therapists whenever they ask me to add something, is it really necessary? And so, if I just cater to everyone's desire or wish, you end up with a platform like Net Health or Facebook that's just very bloated and not user friendly. So, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and add this facility. You can see if I go to the facilities tab, you see Hillside Haven here. I can search for it, or I'm sorry, Pine Hill. I can search for it. I can see every other facility with all their tags. If I click on a tag like nonprofit, it pulls up all the nonprofit facilities. So that's a really awesome and useful feature here. Now let's go ahead and add a therapist. So I'm going to click on the people tab on the sidebar. Shows me every therapist, every patient, every physician, just anyone in the database for ABC Therapy Company. So I'm going to click here and click add or new therapist. All right, so let's call this therapist Ryan Smith. Again, very minimal set of required fields. I'm going to leave most of this stuff blank, but let's go ahead and give Ryan an email address. So we'll say ryan@gmail.com. And I want to invite Ryan to join ABC Therapy Company to basically give him access to use the platform Satsuma within the context of ABC Therapy. So I'm going to just click that check mark here, and that's going to send Ryan an email invitation. So it'll be a really easy sign up process on his end. He'll just basically click a link, sign up, and he'll have access to ABC Therapy. And then let's do something. Let's go ahead and give Ryan a license. So I'm going to click add license, and let's say he's licensed in Louisiana as a physical therapist. I'm going to go ahead and just do that and click add therapist. And boom, he is in the system with an invitation pending. So you'll notice here, Ryan has 3 tabs: details, a schedule tab, and settings. So if I go back to this people table and I click on any person, whether they're a therapist, a patient, or a physician, they all have a very similar layout with some of these tabs. So for instance, let's click on Andrew Bailey, a patient. They have details, admissions, cases, payers, a schedule tab as well, and some settings. So because Andrew's a patient, he gets some extra tabs like admissions, cases, and payers. But for the most part, if there's something that is shared, like a schedule, like even if I click on a facility, I see there's a schedule page here as well. I've tried to keep the UI as consistent as possible. So it's very easy to navigate and for things to just make sense. There aren't 2 different schedule pages for facilities and patients versus therapists. Like, no, there's consistency is another theme of Satsuma. Now let's go over to this patient, Amanda Peters, and let's go ahead and add a patient. So I'm gonna click new patient. Let's say her name is Margaret Jones with birth date May 19th, 1955. We'll mark her as a female. And I'm going to skip admissions and payers for a second and just add the patient. Okay, so here's Margaret. Here's her basic info. And we haven't tied Margaret to any specific facility yet. So the way we do that is via an admission. So we can say, okay, Margaret was admitted to Rosewood Nursing yesterday, and there hasn't been a discharge. She's still there. So I'll go ahead and save that admission. And now Margaret is tied to the facility Rosewood Nursing. But it's possible that in the past, Margaret was also admitted to a different facility. So let's click new admission and say, okay, she was at Willow Creek Care last month from the 1st to the 5th. And I'll save that. And so this is a scenario that doesn't happen very often, is my understanding, but it does happen where one patient can be admitted to multiple facilities over time. And the way I've seen other EMRs handle this is that when you work in the EMR, you're sort of working siloed within a specific facility. And the data in that facility doesn't sync or talk to the data in some other facility. So in a case like this, where Margaret was admitted to 2 different facilities, you would actually have to go into each facility and add Margaret as a patient. In other words, you would add Margaret as a patient 2 separate times. That means you would enter her name twice, her birth date twice, her payers twice, her address twice. And not only are you duplicating effort, but you're creating a situation where data can become out of sync. Maybe you update the pair inside of Rosewood Nursing, but you forget to update it inside of Willow Creek Care, or vice versa. And so this is a bad software design. And in Satxuma, you don't have this problem. There's just Margaret Jones is one person, so you will only ever enter her name once. You'll only ever enter her address once, etc. But she can be tied to 2 different facilities or more via multiple admissions. And when you work in Satxuma, um, you're not siloed within a specific facility. So, if you're used to it that way, it may be a little weird at first, but get rid of that mental model of working within a facility. All right, so let's go ahead and set up a case for Margaret. So I'm going to click New Case, and a case is just a container for an evaluation, recertifications, progress notes, and treatments. So all those things are sort of wrapped up or bundled up into a case. I think in Net Health they call it a track. So a case has a single discipline. In this case, let's do occupational therapy. And let's tie it to, how about Rosewood Nursing? I'm going to add a physician, Emily Green, and I'm going to pick a couple of medical diagnoses. I'm just going to search for elbow and pick something, and ankle and pick something. Ignore the data here. I'm not a therapist, so I don't know what common ICD-10 codes are. But if I wanted to drag these around, I could make this the primary, and then I can pick some onset dates. So we'll just say yesterday. Then I can add my treatment diagnoses the same way. Let's say osteoarthritis. Was she hospitalized previously? Let's go ahead and say yes. Okay, I don't have any hospitals set up yet, so I'm going to add a new one. Let's add a hospital. I'll say Lakeview Hospital in Louisiana. I'm going to save it. Let's say she was admitted on March 1st through March 2nd, inpatient, and save it. All right, then comes the assessment. I'm going to skip this stuff for now, but it is here. And let's go down to measures. So this is another flagship feature of Satxuma. So in this case, I selected an occupational therapy as the discipline. And so here are some measures required by section GG. I can add them one at a time or all together. So let's just go ahead and add dressing independence. I'm going to click this button here, and it sets up a measure. So a measure has a name, in this case, dressing independence. This one is categorical. So the categories are listed here in order. So dependent all the way up to independent. Description, assess the patient's ability to dress themselves. Then we have prior level of function. So we'll say Margaret was independent. And then this is today's date. So this is the current level of function. We'll say currently she's totally dependent. And then let's add some goals. So I'm going to add a short-term goal. Let's say, let's get her to max assist. And a long-term goal. Let's get her back to independent. Okay, so really easy to add goals with prior level function, current level function. And I'll show you, this actually gets cooler in a second. But let's go ahead and say we want to do 5 treatments. And then I'm just going to pick some random CPT codes. Then I'm going to save the case, which creates the case as well as the evaluation. So here it takes me to the eval. And on the right-hand side measures, I can see the dressing independence measure that I created in a graphical form, which is really cool. So along the horizontal axis, you have time. Vertical axis, you have the level of function. And then you can see my short-term goal is due by May 6th, long-term due by May 30th. My prior level is up here. And this was the one measurement that we took so far. So as time goes on, I will edit this goal. So let me click edit, and I'll add some measurements. And let's say tomorrow she is at max assist. Then you'll see that graph start to update. Now, as soon as I sign the eval, this graph freezes. But we can continue to add measurements if we do a recert or progress note. So I'm going to go over to the case page, and here's the case as a whole. And down here, I have a timeline. And on this timeline, you can see there are 0 of 5 treatments scheduled. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button and automatically schedule those 5 treatments. So here they are in my timeline. Then as I do recertifications and progress notes, they'll appear in this timeline as well. Now, if I click on a treatment, I can see there's this treatment details tab, and here are my CPT codes, and this is where I can punch in my minutes. All right, so let's go over to the eval, and I'm just going to sign it as Rick Astley, and I'm going to request a signature from the physician, Emily Green, and I might as well request a signature from Ryan. Okay. Now, eventually, that will send an email to those people asking them to sign a PDF copy of the evaluation. Alrighty. So you can see very user-friendly interface. Now, let's take a look at Margaret's schedule. So we've added these treatments here. And if I go over to her schedule, you can see them laid out here. Now, what's nice about this schedule page is I can pick any date range whatsoever. And in fact, let's go over to her cases and let's just add a physical therapy case as well. I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff. I just want to add 3 treatments, and I'll fill in a few CPT codes, and I want to schedule those treatments. So now if I go over to Margaret's schedule, I see the OT treatments as well as the PT treatments. Now the scheduler needs some work, and I'm looking for feedback on that part of Satxuma. But the idea or the goal is to get to this point where scheduling is just very, very simple and very automated as it can be. So if I pick any date range, let's say the 1st of April through the 4th, for instance, and I apply those filters, I see all the events that Margaret has. I can view them in a table format like this, and I can see stats. I can see how many treatments she has, how much OT treatment time, PT treatment time, ST treatment time, and yeah, I'd like to split out the treatments by discipline and show some other things, but that's another area where I want to figure out what would be most useful as a therapist and as a rehab director to see in the screen. But it's very versatile in the sense that you can pick any date range and you can filter events by tag or person. And if I click an event, I can change the duration, I can change the start date, I can change who's tied to the event, like who's going to participate, as well as I can add tags that help me filter events. So it goes on and on, but as versatile as it is, hopefully it's not too confusing. I tried to keep things relatively simple. Okay, so we've got Margaret Jones and she's got some treatments. And if I go back to her cases, I can see she's got an OT case and a PT case. If I go to her admissions, I see she's got 3 admissions. Notice it added an admission for Lakeview Hospital because she was admitted to the hospital when we added that when we set up the evaluation. And then within this admission, there's a tied case. That's that occupational therapy case that we set up that's currently active. As time goes on, I can add a progress note, a recert, and eventually do a discharge. So now let's go ahead and let's take a look at the dashboard. So on my dashboard, I've got basically 3 windows here. I've got notices, a timesheet, and upcoming events. Upcoming events, pretty self-explanatory. If I was a therapist, I assume this would mostly be filled with treatments. It would tell me who I'm treating today, and who I'm treating like tomorrow or the next day. And then I can just click here and edit the event or add my minutes. Then timesheet. So this is where I can add my time. Eventually, I plan to add productivity stats right here. In fact, that should be coming pretty soon. But nonetheless, I can add time. I can either add time by doing sort of a date and a duration, like I worked 4 hours today, or I could be more specific and say I started work at 8 a.m. and I finished work at, let's say 12 p.m. or something. And if I want to, I can put a classification like maybe I was on annual leave or something. All right. So timesheet, upcoming events, important, not all that exciting. Notices. This is the cool spot. So A notice is anything that you should be made aware of. Likely, it's going to be missing data, documentation that's due, or some sort of compliance issue. So, for example, um, here's a notice: Sophia Foster, case PT evaluation April 28th through May 28th, is missing an eval CPT code, 97161, or one of these. So basically, um, whoever set up this evaluation forgot to add an eval code. So if I just click fix it, it brings me directly to the evaluation, and I can look at the CPT codes here, and I could see, oh yeah, it is missing an eval CPT code. So then I could edit it and add in the code. And so these notices will automatically be generated and refreshed in the background, maybe twice a day, maybe more, maybe less. I'm not sure what's the optimal amount to do it, but assuming you fix this notice, it will disappear by tomorrow. If for some reason you don't care about this, you can snooze the notice. Maybe you want to snooze it for an hour, a day, a week, or a month. And you can also filter notices. So I could say, okay, I want to see every notice related to Sophia. So I click on this little filter icon next to Sophia's name, and I can see that she also has a speech therapy case that's missing CPT code. And actually, it's missing CPT codes altogether. Yeah, look, so there's no CPT codes here. So then I could go in and address that. So I'm going to clear that filter. And let's see if there's any other interesting ones. So patient Ethan Bell doesn't have any admissions. And most of these are just missing CPT codes for now. But what my goal is to build a rich set of notices, because my understanding is that there are many rules that different payers have about, we will not reimburse you for this treatment if XYZ. And so having those things at the front and center in this notices tab will let therapists and directors just immediately see what needs to be addressed. And also with upcoming documentation that's due, it makes it so that therapists don't even have to think. They just sign in, they look at their dashboard, and they can just start knocking these things out one after another. And they don't have to do any sort of thinking about, okay, who do I need to treat today? Okay, what documentation do I need to write today? What do I need to do? What reports do I need to run? No, just look at your notices and knock that stuff out. So that is Satxuma in a nutshell today. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't mention under the hood. Additionally, I'm basically building this. I'm bootstrapping it, which means I'm living off my savings, building this thing in hopes of selling it. I don't have investment capital or anything like that. And so I'm looking for backers, particularly companies who would want to pay up front for Satxuma at a discount, so that when it goes live, you'll have these credits to use Satxuma for much cheaper than it will be at the time it launches. So if you or someone you know might be interested in that, certainly let me know. But even more so than that, I'm just looking for people to give me feedback and just give me your thoughts. All right, so that's your quick introduction to Satxuma. Lots more to come. Stay tuned.